How to play poker.
Poker is a card game that is played with a standard 52-card deck. The objective of the game is to win the pot, which is the sum of all the bets that have been placed during the hand. Players compete against each other to win the pot by either having the best hand or by betting in such a way as to convince their opponents to fold their hands. Here are the basic steps to play poker. Determine the game and stakes. Poker can be played in a variety of different formats, such as Texas Hold'em, Omaha, 7-card stud, and others. It is important to decide which game you want to play and what the stakes will be before starting. Shuffle and deal the cards. The dealer shuffles the cards and deals them to the players according to the specific rules of the game being played. Evaluate your hand. After receiving your cards, you should evaluate the strength of your hand and decide how to play it. Take turns betting. Players take turns making bets, starting with the player to the left of the dealer. During each betting round, players have the option to fold, call, or raise. Showdown. If there is more than one player remaining in the hand after the final betting round, the players show their cards and the player with the best hand wins the pot.
Explain Texas Hold'em rules in detail.
Texas Hold'em is a popular variation of the card game of poker. It is played with a standard 52-card deck, and the objective of the game is to win the pot, which is the sum of all the bets that have been placed during the hand. Here are the rules of Texas Hold'em in detail. The deal. The dealer shuffles the cards and deals 2 cards face down to each player. These cards are known as the hole cards. The pre-flop betting round. The first betting round begins with the player to the left of the dealer. This player can choose to fold, call, match the current bet, or raise, increase the current bet. The betting continues clockwise around the table until all players have either called the current bet or folded. The flop. The dealer burns 1 card, discards it face down, and then deals 3 face-up community cards, which are called the flop. These cards are shared by all the players and can be used to make their hand. The turn. The dealer burns another card and then deals a 4th face-up community card, called the turn. The river. The dealer burns another card and then deals a 5th and final face-up community card, called the river. The showdown. If there is more than one player remaining in the hand after the final betting round, the players show their cards and the player with the best hand wins the pot. The best hand in Texas Hold'em is determined by the standard poker hand ranking system, which ranks hands from highest to lowest as follows: royal flush, straight flush, 4 of a kind, full house, flush, straight, 3 of a kind, 2 pair, 1 pair, high card. Players can use any combination of their whole cards and the community cards to make the best hand. If 2 or more players have the same hand, the pot is split evenly among the winning players.
Give me some Texas Hold'em tips.
Pay attention to position. Your position at the table in relation to the dealer button can have a big impact on your decisions in a hand. Players who act later in a hand have an advantage because they have more information about their opponent's actions. Play tight. As a beginner, it is generally a good idea to play a relatively tight range of hands and to fold most of the time. This can help you avoid getting caught up in costly pots with marginal hands. Pay attention to your opponents. One of the keys to success in poker is to be able to read your opponents and to understand their tendencies and playing styles. Paying attention to how your opponents bet and what hands they show down can give you valuable information that you can use to your advantage. Don't be afraid to fold. Folding is an important part of poker, and it is often better to fold a weak hand than to lose a lot of chips trying to play it. Practice and study. The best way to improve your skills in Texas Hold'em is to practice and study the game. This can involve playing online or in live games, as well as reading strategy articles and books.
How do I bluff effectively in poker?
Bluffing can be a powerful tool in poker, but it is important to use it wisely and sparingly. Here are a few tips for bluffing effectively. Choose the right opponents. It is important to choose opponents who are likely to fold to a bluff. Opponents who are very tight and only play strong hands are generally less likely to fold to a bluff than opponents who are more loose and aggressive. Consider the board. The cards on the board can give you valuable information about the range of hands your opponents may have. If the board is paired or otherwise coordinated, it may be less likely that your opponents have a strong hand. Bet for value. When you bluff, it is generally a good idea to bet an amount that will get your opponents to fold, but that is not so large that it will be too costly for you to lose the pot if your bluff is called. Vary your play. Mixing up your play can help you keep your opponents guessing and make it more difficult for them to predict when you are bluffing. Don't overuse bluffing. Bluffing can be a useful tool, but it should not be the basis of your poker strategy. Overuse of bluffing can lead to other players catching on to your tactics and calling your bets more often. Bluffing effectively in poker requires a combination of skill, strategy, and psychology. It is important to carefully consider the specific circumstances of each hand and the tendencies of your opponents when deciding whether to bluff.
What are some good strategies to raise a bet in Texas Hold'em?
Raising a bet in Texas Hold'em can be a powerful way to win pots and to control the action in a hand. Here are a few strategies that you can use when raising a bet. Value raising. Value raising is when you raise with a strong hand in order to extract more value from your opponents. This can be a good strategy when you have a hand like top pair with a strong kicker or a set, as it can help you win a larger pot and force your opponents to pay more to see future streets. Bluff raising. Bluff raising is when you raise with a weak hand in an attempt to represent a strong hand and get your opponents to fold. This can be a risky strategy, as it can be costly if your opponents call or raise with a stronger hand. Semi-bluff raising. Semi-bluff raising is when you raise with a hand that has some potential to improve on future streets, such as a flush or straight draw. This can be a good way to build the pot and to get your opponents to fold, as you have some backup equity if your hand does not improve. It is important to consider the specific circumstances of the hand and the tendencies of your opponents when deciding whether and how to raise a bet.
How much should I raise in Texas Hold'em?
The amount that you should raise in Texas Hold'em will depend on a variety of factors, including the size of the pot, the strength of your hand, and the tendencies of your opponents. Here are a few general guidelines to consider when deciding how much to raise. Bet enough to get value. If you have a strong hand and want to extract as much value as possible, you should raise enough to get your opponents to call. This will typically mean raising to a larger amount than the size of the pot. Bet enough to build the pot. If you are bluffing or semi-bluffing and want to build the pot, you should raise an amount that is larger than the size of the pot. This will help you create a larger pot that is more enticing for your opponents to call. Bet enough to create a fold. If you want to get your opponents to fold, you should raise an amount that is large enough to convince them that you have a strong hand. This will typically mean raising to a very large amount, especially if your opponents are tight and only play strong hands. It is important to consider the specific circumstances of the hand and the tendencies of your opponents when deciding how much to raise. It may also be helpful to pay attention to the size of the pot, as this will help you determine an appropriate bet size relative to the amount that is already in the pot.
How does positioning work in Texas Hold'em?
In Texas Hold'em, position refers to the order in which the players act on their hands. Players who act later in a hand have an advantage because they have more information about their opponent's actions. There are three main positions in Texas Hold'em. The dealer. The dealer position is also known as the button, and is considered the best position in the game. The player on the button acts last in each betting round and has the most information about their opponent's actions. The small blind. The small blind position is the player to the left of the dealer. This player acts first before the flop and last after the flop. The big blind. The big blind position is the player to the left of the small blind. This player acts second before the flop and second to last after the flop. In addition to these three main positions, there are also positions called early position, middle position, and late position, which refer to the order in which the players act relative to the blinds. Players in early position act before the players in middle position, who act before the players in late position. It is important to consider your position when making decisions in a hand of Texas Hold'em. Players in early position are generally more limited in the hands that they can play profitably, while players in late position have more flexibility and can play a wider range of hands.
When does a game of Texas Hold'em end?
A game of Texas Hold'em typically ends when all but one player have folded their hands or when one player has all the chips in the pot and their opponents have run out of chips. If all but one player folds, the remaining player wins the pot and the game ends. If there are multiple players remaining in the hand after the final betting round, the players show their cards and the player with the best hand wins the pot. The game can also end if one player has all the chips in the pot and their opponents have run out of chips. In this case, the player with all the chips is declared the winner. In tournament play, the game can also end when the predetermined length of the tournament has been reached. In this case, the player with the most chips at the end of the tournament is declared the winner.
Do you agree with ChatGPT? Did this video help you to learn how to play Texas Hold'em?
Thanks for watching. Please gently hit the thumbs up and the subscribe button for more content.